He's like, you're the top 5% income earners in the whole entire world. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not happy. I did 4 years of undergrad and then 7 years of MD, PhD, and then 3 years of residency, and just got as far away from my home as I could. If the prize is big enough and important enough to you, no excuses kind of hold any water.
Welcome to Inspired by Success, the podcast where I deep dive into the mindset of successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, and thought leaders. Get ready to be inspired and gain valuable insights to unlock your true potential.
Transform your financial future with this episode sponsored by KE Financial Services.
Growing up facing childhood sexual abuse and family alcoholism, our guest defied the odds to become the first person in her family to earn a bachelor's, MD, and PhD. Despite the challenges, her determination and resilience propelled her to a successful career as a board-certified physician. But her journey didn't stop there. She transitioned from medicine to empower women to break free from self-doubt, embrace their power, and live passionate, purposeful lives. Today, we will hear her inspiring story from overcoming trauma to becoming an award-winning author, entrepreneur, and mentor devoted to helping others tap into their inner greatness. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Dr. Cindy Starke.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's so my pleasure to be here tonight with your audience, and thank you for having me on your show.
No worries. Tell us your story, and you've overcome so much in your life. Take us back to your story, and where did you find the resilience despite all the trauma in your childhood? Because I'm fascinated to know and learn.
I do kind of want to give a disclaimer. I didn't even realize that what I had gone through as a child was trauma or rape or sexual abuse until I was, about 46 years old. I feel like it was kind of repressed. And so it was kind of operating underneath the surface, and I didn't even know that it was there. But all I could see around me and all I can remember as a child is that everybody were doing these weird things that made no sense to me, like drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, clipping coupons. I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase, but like we would spend every Saturday and Sunday clipping coupons. And I'm like, why are we having to clip coupons? Can we not afford groceries and stuff like that? And just complaining a lot about jobs, and everybody in my family and extended family, meaning my grandma, grandpa, aunts, and uncles, they were just always drinking all the time. And my brother, through an unfortunate series of events, turned to alcohol and drugs at a very young age. And then all of his friends started coming around. And all I can say is there was this one summer where he just kept having all these parties at my house, and his friends were 19, I was 14, and my mom and dad were out with friends, and these guys would come into my room at night and with their hands, not anything else, but still not what I wanted to have done to my body night after night. Things were happening to me. I wasn't able to tell anybody kind of what was happening. It started happening at my friends' houses too. Like their brothers were messing with me at night. And to be honest with you, Linda, I just saw school and education as a way of being more safe than in my own home, because I knew like I would be in a dorm, and all girls dorm, and nobody would mess with me at night. And I think of education and athletics in the same way, where your gender doesn't matter and you can't get abused and belittled because of your gender. And I was very well aware of that as a child, even though I was from a very blue collar family. And so I just escaped into, I just kind of like found my way into the university setting, and I just kind of hid out there for like the next 30 years. It felt like. I'm exaggerating, but I did 4 years of undergrad and then 7 years of MD, PhD, and then 3 years of residency. And I just got as far away from my home as I could. And at that point, the resilience came from, I saw a way out. I got out. I was dating a guy whose dad said, you got to go to college. You're the smartest girl in your class. Why aren't you going to college? And I said, I can go to college. Like, wasn't on the menu I was given. And he said, yeah, you can go to college. And I was valedictorian of my class. So I just started doing things like taking standardized tests and applying to colleges. And sure enough, when I got to college, I naturally kind of gravitated toward the sciences, and everybody I met were going to medical school and graduate school. So it just kind of took a life of its own. And I tell you, at the time, I've often wondered, my dad will even say to this day, he's like, how did you have the gumption to do what you did? And I just know I was kind of being pushed. It's almost like a spiritual thing. I think that God, source, universe, whatever you and your listeners like to call it, I just feel like I was being pushed, and all these paths just kind of started being made wide open for me. And it was really tough, but I would rather have that tough than stay in the kind of childhood I was brought up in, you know? And sure enough, the older I got, I saw cousins. They were having kids out of, not that there's anything wrong with this. I'm just saying I didn't want this for myself. Kids out of wedlock. They were drinking and getting pulled over for DUIs. It's just a lot of problems in my family. And I was so thankful for the decisions I made as a really young person because I didn't have to deal with any of that stuff.
You could have taken that pathway and not known any better and just gone downhill on a spiral and used that victim mentality, like I've been abused, just to go downhill. But
Yeah.
you went the opposite way, and that's
Yeah.
really, really inspiring, and I love it. But you've gone full blown, like, into a doctor. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So
Thank
tell us,
you.
it's amazing. What steps did you take for your self-healing? Like, you sounded like you escaped, like you said, you repressed it all and you took that focus and you put it into education and becoming a doctor. But what steps did you take for your self-healing as well? Because that's continuous, because childhood trauma does affect how we think as an adult as well. And sometimes subconsciously we don't know that we're repressing some of the things as well. Do therapy, meditation? What steps did you take to
Yeah.
help you heal?
It's so interesting because it's 8 o'clock at night where I am right now. And at 6:30, I met with my counselor. We meet once a week on Wednesday nights on a Zoom call. And she's been in my life for almost 4 years since the pandemic. But yeah, it's been a lot of therapy and a lot of books, a lot of journaling. Sometimes, Linda, I kind of did some things. I feel like I was overachieving to kind of deal with my trauma. I was trying to prove to myself I was worthy of the love and protection that I didn't get that summer. And I found myself doing maybe too much. You know, a lot of us kind of numb out. We don't want to feel the pain of what we're feeling inside. So we numb out, whether it's with spending or traveling or education in my instance, just a constant distraction. But you know what I do right now is I spend a lot of time in the woods, and I found this woman that was kind of like over the pandemic. Again, the pandemic really opened up a lot of self-healing. It kind of gave me a lot of time, but she led these things called vortex tours. And I would I've been to Australia, and then also Sedona, Arizona, and then up in North Carolina. And there are these pockets of energy in the earth, and you just kind of almost surrender to this universal life force. And there's just all these trees and geothermal forces, and you just kind of soak in the forest. And that's what I've kind of really been into lately. They're guided. So the one in North Carolina is guided. I just on my own spend as much time in nature as I can, and that really helps. But yeah, a lot of counseling, like I said. And then I'll tell you the biggest thing that I did that I think broke off a lot of the healing of the limiting beliefs are October of the pandemic. The whole world stopped March 13th that year. And then in October, I found a woman named Melissa in Texas, and she did this thing called subconscious repatterning and rewiring, where you take whatever childhood trauma that you experienced and you kind of get rid of it one layer at a time. And you kind of like drop down this matrix, and all these limiting beliefs and all the fear and anxiety and guilt and sadness kind of like will just drop down, and you clear out your reticular activating system. And that's what I now teach to my clients and show them that they don't have to let I'm not worthy rule their life anymore, or that's not for me, or I'm damaged goods, or whatever limiting beliefs are ruling your life. So that was the biggest thing, was this trauma release method that I went through in 2020. But I'm constantly in communication with my therapist too. So yeah, it's multifaceted, Linda. It comes up all day, every day, unfortunately. I kind of butt up against myself, you know?
Healing is an ongoing process too, but there's a lot of things to unpack. First of all, the vortex thing in Australia, that sounds fascinating. Where is that? Because I want to check that out. The forest thing. Did you say Australia? You said one in Australia, yeah?
Yeah, I'll tell you the best place that I did some forest healing was, oh my goodness, what was it called? Kuranda or something? It's like that deep in the rainforest. And it was I'm thinking it was in Sydney. I went all over your
Oh,
country, Sydney, Melbourne, and Cairns. And I think it was in Sydney. Let's look up Coranda. I can email it to you and you can put it in the show notes. But it's something about the age of the forest and then the types of trees that are there. And to me, any tall trees will do it for you. Like there are these aromatic phenylamines, literally compounds that come off of the trees that they are healing to our human body if we will just subject ourselves to them. And then even
Mm.
just the sunlight will help us too. The more time you can spend in nature, the better, because that is where we thrive. And the other ones are in America. But yeah, you're wanting the ones that are in Australia. Where are you in Australia?
I'm based in Sydney too, so I'm going to definitely check it out. I do believe that Mother Nature does help heal, especially when I'm stressed. I love to go to Queensland where there's my sister in laws, there's beach areas, and it's just so beautiful and it's really calming. So, nature for me is being
Yes.
in the beach, but going for walks in the forest sounds like an amazing thing to do. You mentioned limiting beliefs because a lot of us do have our own limiting beliefs, especially if you're brought up in not so great circumstances or bad childhood. And so, some of these limiting beliefs do affect us, but how can you mentioned some techniques as well to get rid of these limiting beliefs. Can you share how one can start to remove some of these limiting beliefs and then think bigger thoughts? Because sometimes, because you've been brought up in that world where you were the first to go to college, a lot of people may be like in a world where there's small things and scarcity mindset or a poor upbringing and whatnot, not the greatest upbringing, but they don't see that extra perspective, that extra level. So, how do we remove those limiting beliefs and see the bigger picture of what we're capable of? Can you share some tips?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this method that I teach, and I run workshops once a month. So if people can go to my website and attend those free workshops, and I always do a clearing, they're called a clearing at the end of my workshops. And we either clear out anger or sadness or guilt or fear. But the way to completely clear out the limiting beliefs, you have to first start with a very systematic approach. And again, I'm just telling you how I did it with the trauma healing method, but we clear out every influence that affected us up until the age of 7. So we do influence by influence, and then we do the emotion by emotion, and then it clears out this grid. You enter this semi-meditative state and you use neuro-linguistic programming, I do, on this meditation, and kind of help you address all these fears that you had as a child that you don't even remember, and you kind of resource your inner children. And it's this whole 30-minute process. But if you don't do that with me in my workshop, just in general, one thing that I find very helpful is to get around people that are doing the things that you want to do in your life that you're not seeing as a possibility, and sit in nature, preferably, but definitely just with yourself, and search your heart for what your dreams are and what your goals are and journal about it. And then get some support and accountability so that you can be that best version of yourself. Because a lot of us just literally can't think outside of our own circumstances, you know? And
Mm.
I've seen that a lot, even in medicine. So I broke out of being a full time doctor and I retired, and now I'm a part time doctor. I'm a 1099. I'm an entrepreneur. I see patients when I want to see them and in the places I want to, and in the ways that I want to, and the hours I want to. I don't belong to anybody anymore. There are so many doctors that have just been so ingrained to this W-2, that's what we call it in our country, like this mainstream kind of a job, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. They cannot even imagine doing anything outside of that. And so I really feel like certain people are gifted with this bigger mindset. And if you are feeling like something is holding you back, you can reach out to me, but you also get around people that are doing the things that you want to because they've figured it out.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And seek out mentors is one. Let's take it back because it sounds like, from being a doctor, they're trained a certain way as well. And it seems like you've branched out. You do some meditation, you do other things as spiritual as well. And that's not common. And I like that because you've broken out of that box. So that's
Okay.
not very common, which I love that. I'm fascinated about that because you're thinking different as well. But what made you transition from being a doctor in that 9 to 5 world to becoming an entrepreneur as well? Still doing the doctor and helping people, but Was there a pivotal moment that changed your mindset as well? Because the pandemic did shift a lot of mindsets as well, and you could see the facade for what it was. Let's just
Yeah.
be real here. But, spiritually, that's not common because my cousin's a doctor and she does a bit of like acupuncture, and that's very rare to come out of that traditional doctor GP role. That's unique. So what key moment for you that sparked that interest to change?
I'm sitting here trying to think of like when it started, because it's been happening for a while. This awareness of whatever it was that I was taught in medical school is not all that there is to know. And I think what happened, Linda, is I was in a car accident when my son was about 1 and my daughter was about 3. And I got T-boned, so I had a big minivan and somebody hit me from the side, and it did something to my neck and my back, but no doctor could figure out what it was. And I went to 3 doctors and I got 3 x-rays, and I'm like, I am just really hurting. Even just to pick up a cup of coffee would send like a knife stabbing feeling in the middle of my back. And they literally said, nothing is wrong with you. Here's 3 bottles of pills. We're clueless. And the pills were a muscle relaxer, an anti-inflammatory, and a painkiller. And they called it a cocktail, which I didn't like that they were calling it a cocktail either. They were giving me 3 bottles of pills, and I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old under my
Yeah.
care. I didn't want to take those medicines. I just say, again, God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it, the place I was practicing at that time, underneath, so I was on level 2. On level 1 was a chiropractor, and I went down there and met that chiropractor, and she got me better in 1 adjustment. And I had never heard of a chiropractor before, and that started this mindset shift of maybe everything that I was just taught for the last 13 years isn't all there is to know, and maybe there's something else to learn. And so that started this whole pathway of looking at nutrition and exercise. I met some key women. There was just a lot of very powerful women, very strong willed, powerful women in my life, kind of starting at age 32 when I had that car accident. Then I met a woman that kind of introduced me to triathlon, which is when I wrote my book. That woman kind of introduced me to somebody else that was like this other lady that did something called Reiki on me. And I'm like, what is Reiki? But I was just getting massages, and she would just like run her hands over my body, and I would start crying and releasing these emotions. And I said, what in the world are you doing to me? And she said, I'm just releasing pent up, stuck energy in your energy fields. And I just became absolutely fascinated. And I just started consuming a lot of material, whether it was podcasts, books, or retreats. I just like I couldn't learn enough at that point. So that's what started all of it, was that car accident, and no doctor able to help me.
Wow. And I
Yeah.
think it definitely takes a lot of open-mindedness and curiosity to learn as well, because I've noticed successful people are very curious and definitely willing to learn and consume knowledge constantly. So
Yeah.
another question is, what inspired you to write your book, the book From Fear to Failure to Finish Line? What inspired you to write, and what are the key lessons can you share?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I, this was a funny story. It was actually a business coach, to be honest. I don't want to kind of get into the whole backstory, but let's just suffice it to say, I got this idea. This business coach put this idea in my mind. He was trying to teach me something about business, and he wanted something really big to kind of hang my knowledge on, so to speak. And so he said, you either have to hike the Appalachian Trail, complete a Ironman triathlon, or build a house. Those are my 3 choices. I said, well, I don't want to build a house and I don't want to hike the Appalachian Trail. My kids are like 7 and 9 years old. I'll do the Ironman triathlon. What does that entail? What does that have to do? He said, well, you have to start by swimming in an ocean for 2.4 miles, which is almost 2 hours. I've never done anything but just splash around in a pool. Then you have to bike for 120 miles. That takes 8 hours. I'd never biked except for just, maybe for 3 minutes. So I'm like,
Yeah.
8 hours, 120 miles. Okay. What else? Then you got to run a marathon at the end of it, 26.2 mile run. I'd never run over a 5K, which is 3 miles. So we started this process, Linda, of 2 years long. And he taught me how to do all 3 of those things to those lengths. Okay. I started out my training by tearing a ligament in my thumb because I fell off my bike and tore a ligament. I had all kinds of little snafus along the way. I would fall and scrape myself, or I'd fall off the bike. Really bad ocean swim experiences. I just wasn't liking any of it. But I'm like, I'm doing this because he told me this is going to teach me how to build this business. So after 2 years of training, I show up to the start line. I'm in Panama City Beach, Florida, and the ocean swim was a lot rougher. The whole book is about what I'm telling you right now. The ocean swim
Mm.
was a lot rougher than it was supposed to be, which put me on the bike a little bit later than I was supposed to be. And by the time I'd gotten to mile 80 of 120 miles of the bike, all these people were standing in the middle of the path. There were like all these humans standing, and it was just like open road biking. So I was 8 hours into the 17-hour event. And bottom line is, they pulled me off the course, and they pulled 50 other people off the course because we missed a cutoff by like 10 minutes. We weren't biking fast enough. So I finished it with something called I did not finish, a DNF. And I had trained and I was ready for that race. And the devastation on me that day, I just couldn't believe I was getting pulled off that trail. I could not believe that 50 other people had also gotten pulled off the race. And there were all these grown men crying. It was just very traumatic. And so my coach was there, and I said, I don't know what happened. And so we figured out what happened is that I didn't know the course of the bike. And so I had slowed down trying to not get lost. And I said, I don't want my story to end like this, Andy. Like, I don't want this to be the end of my story. So from fear and failure to the finish line. So I failed, and I was afraid, and I don't want that to be my story. So he got me to get to train again and do another one. So I ended up getting to the finish line. So the book is all about me repeating all of that training, another 8 weeks of training, and then I crossed my dang finish line, and I got my medal, and I proved to myself I could do it. But it's just a story about perseverance, and how, again, if you can find the right mentors, and if you can break things into small enough parts, you can do anything you set your mind to. And so it's just to not let fear, specifically, don't let failure define you. You got more in you than you think you do. So that's what the whole book is about. And I inspired like all these young girls and readers from all across the country. It was a really fun time of my life when I wrote that book.
Wow, it sounds like an incredible story too. You
Yeah.
pushed a lot of boundaries, and you would have had to suffer a lot too, because it just reminds me of the Goggins book too. David Goggins wrote a book and it sounded very similar, the training and the pain that he had to go through too. So you would have had to do a lot of self-talk while you were pushing through this triathlon. Take us back to some of the things that you had to tell yourself as well. And these must apply in your everyday life as well, I'm guessing, because just curious that a business coach would tell you to do a triathlon. Where is the connection, and what is that self-talk that you were telling
Oh,
yourself?
goodness. He was trying to teach me that when you want to run a successful business, there are certain things that you have to do little spurts of. So every week I would do a really short sprint, swim, bike, and run. And every week I would do a really long swim, bike, and run. So he said some days are going to be long in your business and some days are going to be short. But it's the mental toughness that we're building, that you can do this huge thing called an Ironman triathlon by little tiny increments of work. And so that was the correlation. He was like, you're going to have to make the phone calls. You're going to have to, write the emails. You're going to have some long days where you're having to do such and such and such and such. So that was the correlation, just business activities, that it wasn't going to be done with one day of effort. It was going to have to be little bits of effort all the time. I hate to say it, but I did not ever make it in that business. I was trying, and I never did another triathlon after that. And I haven't stayed in touch with that business coach because I don't really think that that method worked for me. But the self-talk while I was going through it, it required a lot of mental toughness. It required a lot of, you had to stop thinking of yourself as a typical American. Like, there were a lot of holidays that when everybody else, I could smell the barbecues, as I was running and biking, I could smell all these barbecues going when I was on like my weekly 6 hour bike, and my weekly 2.5 hour run. And no matter what was going on in the world, you had to do it, or you wouldn't have that fitness in your legs to be able to accomplish the task on the day of the event. So it was almost like no excuses. To add another layer, not only were there no excuses, like you couldn't just miss any workouts, but then you also had to eat a certain way the night before. And whether you wanted to or not, you had to carb load before your really long run days or bike days. And then when you were running or biking or swimming, you had to prepare all this food and consume something every 15 minutes. So, like, it's just whether you wanted to do it or not, you just had to do it. So, you just had to have a lot of mental toughness. It's just like if the prize is big enough and important enough to you, no excuses kind of hold any water.
I
That's
love
the
that.
kind of talk I had. Yeah.
I love that. And I think that mental toughness also came from your childhood experiences and made you who you are today too, because you've done so much in your life too. But let's talk about you as an entrepreneur and applying all the skills that you've learned doing the triathlon. What challenges did you face as an entrepreneur and how did you navigate them?
Oh my goodness. Entrepreneurship has been one challenge after another, and I am still in the process of slaying that dragon. In order to do something different, you have to be able to think different. And I mean, I still can't believe I did it sometimes, Linda, but I put in my resignation for my full time job. This was like the proverbial golden handcuffs, where you have this full time job, you have all these benefits, you have retirement. I even had something called profit sharing where they kind of put extra money into a 401k just because I was a shareholder physician at this clinic. I'd been there for 17 years. To become an entrepreneur and just like let all that go because you believe in yourself, that you know something that's better for yourself, that's going to be more aligned with your mind, body, and spirit, and like literally align your chakras, like what we do in Reiki. I just was so ego driven at that time, and I needed to be more in my heart. I just was really into the title and doing kind of like what the status quo was, what everybody else was doing. And I had to realize that this is not right for me. And I hate to say this because it was very sad, but I had to leave my husband at the time because he didn't believe in me. And he was my biggest naysayer. And he just didn't think there's anybody in the world that would quit a job. He's like, "You're the top 5% income earners in the whole entire world." I'm like, "I don't care. I'm not happy. I can't
Mm.
stay. Like, I literally can't stay doing this," because I knew there was a better way. And now I just get to do a lot of consulting. I still take care of a lot of patients. I run workshops too, and I just really pour into the lives of women, whether they're in the medical field or just in the second halves of their life, where they are maybe in a big state of transition, Linda, where they've retired, they've gotten divorced, they've become an empty nester, and they've lost their way. And I lead retreats in nature and just help people kind of connect back with themselves now. I hope I answers your question, but it just really required a lot of mental toughness and self trust.
It sounds like you're more fulfilled as well. You're more
Yes.
fulfilled. But financially, when you're
Same.
the top 5% income earner, though, sometimes entrepreneurship is hard. It might be a bit of a personal question, but have you made up for that, the amount of
Yeah.
money in your own way?
You know,
Surpassed it all? Like some
yeah,
people are happy making less, but financially, are you still in a better position now or before, or are you just more happier? How does it look?
Yeah, well, you know what is so interesting? I literally work 9 days a month and I have 21 days off every month. And I make double the money I used to make working 21 days a month and only having 9 days a month off. I'm not kidding. And I knew that would happen because I can layer jobs, like I have some that are virtual and some that are in person and some that just require a medical director position. And then I can just host retreats when I want to and
Mm.
write books when I want to, write blogs when I want to, do podcasts when I want to. And so a lot of stuff I do is not even paid, but I actually make double the money and I work a fraction of the time. So I have a really good financial planner, and he and she, there's a group, a man and woman team, and they've taught me how to make things work the way that it's supposed to, like make my money work for me.
I love it. It sounds
Yeah.
very inspiring. You're fulfilled and you're making good money and you have more freedom, which is ideally the perfect life. um,
Yes. That's my definition of success, is getting more time with my kids, with my mom, my sister, my great nephews, nature, just time to garden, like all this kind of
mm,
stuff, just kind of being silent sometimes. And when you're in the rat race all the time, you almost can't even remember that there was a part of you inside that needs that silence.
I love it. And this is just so inspiring. Who has been your biggest inspiration, whether that be books, mentors, podcasts, who have impacted you and made a massive difference in your life?
That is a good question. I would say there are a couple of authors that I really, really like, and one of them is Glennon Doyle. And she's married to a woman named Abby Weinbach, and she left a very unfulfilling husband, a relationship with her husband, and completely did something different. Married a woman, raised her kid. They actually co-parent, the mom and the dad, and then the other, the two moms co-parent these kids together. And she talks all about kind of finding your inner self and not being in a cage of societal expectations. She's a major inspiration for me. And then there's a Gay Hendricks who wrote a book called The Big Leap, and it's all about getting out of your zone of comfort and into your zone of genius. And he really opened my mind and opened my eyes onto how to find things that really light you up in the world.
Do you have any key messages that you'd like to leave with our audience as well? Something that you'd like to share?
I say whatever it is that you've done in your past and whatever kind of childhood you were brought up in, don't think that that's going to have to define you for the rest of your life, that you can do whatever it is that you want to do in your life. You just have to find the right tribe, or tribe might not be the right word, but group of people that are there to help you. And then also believe in yourself. And the biggest, most important thing is to spend time outside in nature, because there is wisdom in nature. And if you're just always inside all the time, you are cutting off what I call the universal life force. And it's just, we thrive when we're around God's creation.
That's beautiful. This conversation has been really inspiring and I really enjoyed it, guys. If you've enjoyed it as well, please do me a favor, hit the like and subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast, please hit the follow button. It does support the channel and help it grow. Finally, where can people find you, Dr. Cindy Starke?
Yes, I have a website. It is so easy. It's called drcindystark.com. And there's a way to connect with me. Send me an email, book a call with me, watch my trainings, look at all my other podcasts, and just tell you a lot of things about myself. Even my social media contacts are on there. So that's a one-stop shopping, drcindystark.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the best. And I'm looking forward to hearing more. And I'm going to read your book too, because it sounds like you've had a fascinating, inspiring life.
Thank you so much. Thank you again for having me, Linda. And you have a good rest of your day too.